Welcome to the Explainer. So, you know that feeling when you're staring at a massive spreadsheet? Just a total jumble of historical numbers, dates, figures, and it's honestly just completely overwhelming. Yeah, we've all been there. It's confusing. But what if we could take all that chaotic data and actually transform it into a clear, compelling visual story? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're looking at a simple guide to building what's called a histogram. Now, I know the name sounds a bit technical, but don't let it intimidate you. By the end of this, you'll see just how incredibly simple it is to turn your raw data into a really beautiful, easy-to-read picture. Here's our game plan for today. 1. Meet the histogram. 2. Setting up your foundation. 3. Connecting the dots. 4. The false baseline. And finally, 5. Leveling up your graph.
All right, part 1. Meet the histogram.
So the textbook definition tells us a histogram is a time series graph that visually represents historical data, showing the value of one or more variables over a period of time. Right, let me play jargon translator for a second. In plain English, it's really just a picture that shows how things change as time passes. That's the whole shebang. Whether you're tracking a city's population over 100 years or, just looking at daily temperatures over a single week, a histogram basically takes those raw numbers and physically maps out their journey through time. Moving on to part 2, setting up your foundation. Think of building a graph exactly like building a house. You literally can't put the roof on until you've poured the concrete and got your walls up, right? So let's pour that concrete. You'll often hear the term independent variable plotted on the horizontal x-axis. Now, if you're somewhat new to data viz, that phrase might give you some math class flashbacks, but independent variable is just a fancy, dressed-up term for time. It's the horizontal line sitting right at the very bottom of your graph. Basically, think of time as the floor of your house. It marches forward independently, completely unfazed by whatever else is going on, just moving smoothly left to right along that bottom edge. Okay, next up is the dependent variable. This guy lives on the vertical y-axis. Translating the jargon once again, this is simply the actual value of your data. It gets plotted on the vertical line going straight up the side. Going back to our house analogy, if time is the floor, these data values are your walls. And the height of those walls depends entirely on what moment in time we're looking at. So time sits flat on the bottom, and your data stands up nice and tall on the side. Now, here's the thing. Once your floor and walls are actually up, people need to know who lives there. In graph terms, that means you need a concise, self-explanatory title. It's absolutely crucial. Think of it like nailing an address or a nameplate right to the front door. Your audience should literally never have to guess what they're looking at. A good, clear title tells them the story right away, even before they start digging into the lines and numbers. And the final piece of our foundation is getting your scaling right. The numbers you choose for both your bottom timeline and your vertical data line need to be clearly indicated and structured. This is what makes sure your data is depicted effectively. Imagine trying to build a house with a measuring tape where, the inches are all completely random sizes. It'd be disaster. By setting up clear, consistent number scales, you guarantee the visual representation of your data is totally accurate and actually means something to the person looking at it. Which brings us to part 3, connecting the dots. All right, foundation poured, walls up, address on the door, check, check, and check. Now we get to the fun part, placing our actual data onto this newly built foundation. We've got 3 simple steps here. First, you plot your data points for the given periods. Just look at a specific time on the bottom, find the matching data value on the side, and pop a dot exactly where they intersect. Second, you join those points. How? Simple. Just draw straight lines directly from dot to dot. And third, actually this is super important, so don't skip this, ensure your order is chronological. You always connect the dots moving forward in time, following your floor left to right. So what happens when you do all that? Well, the resulting curves rise and fall indicates exactly how the data changes over time. It's like magic. That simple zigzagging line instantly reveals the whole story. As your eyes track the line going up and down, you immediately grasp the highs, the lows, and the overall historical trends without having to read a single spreadsheet cell. It's the difference between staring at 30 days of random temperature readings and instantly seeing a visual story of a massive sudden winter freeze.
Okay, part 4, the false baseline.
Now, like any good set of structural rules, there's an exception we need to talk about. First, let's establish the golden rule of that vertical y-axis, the wall of our graph. Normally, it absolutely must start right at 0. 0 is ground level. Starting at 0 ensures the visual proportions of your graph are honest, accurate, and totally grounded in reality. But what if your data doesn't start anywhere near 0? Say you're tracking numbers that are way up in the thousands or even millions. If you stubbornly start your vertical wall at 0, you're going to end up with this massive empty gap on your canvas before your data line even bothers to show up. The fix here is what we call a false baseline. If there's a huge gap between 0 and your lowest number, you basically break the y-axis. You visually show a skip in the numbers, and you start the visible scale much closer to your actual data. It's a smart little trick that prevents that giant empty space while still keeping the structure honest. And finally, part 5, leveling up your graph. All right, so you've got a solid foundation, your dots are logically connected, and you know how to handle those giant numbers. You're definitely ready for some pro moves. What if you want to track more than one thing at a time? Well, a single histogram can absolutely display data for multiple variables. You just throw multiple curves onto the same graph. But, and this is a big but, to stop your graph from looking like a tangled bowl of spaghetti, you have to clearly distinguish between them. You can use different line types, like maybe one is solid and another is dashed. Or even better, use different colors. It keeps your story crystal clear even when you've got a bunch of variables interacting. Our last pro tip is double scaling. Let's say you want to compare two variables on the same graph, but they are measured in entirely different units. Imagine trying to see if rainfall, measured in inches, has a relationship with temperature, measured in degrees. You obviously can't use the exact same vertical number line for inches and degrees, right? That wouldn't make sense. So you use a double scale. You pop the scale for inches on the left side of your graph and the scale for degrees on the right side. Both variables still share that same timeline on the bottom, which lets you perfectly spot the relationship between totally different types of data all in one neat picture. So let's take a really quick second to summarize what we've covered with this handy little checklist. Look how manageable this is. Time goes on the bottom x-axis. Data goes on the vertical y-axis. Use a false baseline if your lowest number is huge. Join your points with chronological straight lines. And finally, ensure you've got a clear title and appropriate scaling. Seriously, this is your foolproof, jargon-free blueprint for taking confusing numbers and turning them into clear, visual narratives. We've stripped away all that confusing statistical terminology and laid out the foundation step by step. You now have the tools, simple but super powerful tools, to build a compelling histogram entirely from scratch. So the question I want to leave you with today is this. Now that you actually know the rules of construction, what hidden history will your own data reveal? The stories are right there in your numbers, just waiting for you to draw them out. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, happy graphing.